11 June 1944, Dordogne region, southwestern France. 5 days after the Allied landings in Normandy, resistance fighters strike at the railway station in the small town of Mussidan, destroying a German military train carrying supplies to the Normandy front. The fighting leaves 8 guerrillas dead, along with most of the German personnel guarding the train. News of the attack spreads quickly, and German forces prepare to respond. By afternoon, a convoy from the German 11th Panzer Division arrives from the city of Bordeaux. Resistance fighters withdraw into the countryside, but the town remains exposed. German forces and collaborators move through Mussidan with deliberate purpose, rounding up men over the age of 16 from their homes and workplaces. Fear grips the population as arrests mount, and the streets fall silent as families wait behind shuttered windows, anticipating violence and death. German forces will then line up dozens of innocent civilians, among them the mayor of the town, and summarily execute them. This atrocity, committed by the Nazis and their collaborators against the local civilian population, becomes known as the Mussidan Massacre. However, this crime will not remain unpunished, and the perpetrators will pay for their crimes with their own lives. The Second World War began on 1 September 1939 with the German invasion of Poland. The German invasion of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands started on 10 May 1940 and became known as the Battle of France. As part of the armistice agreement France signed with Germany on 22 June 1940, France was divided into occupied and unoccupied zones. Germany occupied northern France and all of France's Atlantic coastline down to the border with Spain. A new French government was established in Vichy in the unoccupied southern part of the country. The Vichy government declared neutrality, but it was bound by the armistice provisions to cooperate with Germany. The formation of the French resistance was a gradual process. However, as the German occupation authorities and the Vichy regime became increasingly brutal and intimidating, they inspired the formation of paramilitary groups dedicated to both active and passive resistance. In rural areas, members of the resistance were called the Maquis. The Maquis were known to be ready for anything and eager for vengeance against the Germans. On 6 June 1944, the Allied landing in Normandy transformed the situation in occupied France. What had long been a hidden struggle now entered an open and dangerous phase. German commanders feared that resistance networks across the country would rise in support of the advancing Allied armies. Orders were issued to secure communication lines and ensure that reinforcements could move north without interruption. For the Maquis, the landings were the signal they had been waiting for. Their task was clear: disrupt German transport, destroy railway lines, sabotage bridges, and delay troop movements toward the Normandy front. Across southwestern France, resistance groups intensified their operations, targeting infrastructure essential to the German war effort. They understood that every train stopped and every bridge damaged could slow the enemy's response to the invasion. On the morning of 11 June 1944, several Maquis groups entered Mussidan in the Dordogne region, a quiet town of just over 2,000 inhabitants. Their objective was to strike the railway bridge over the Isle River and attack German transports moving through the station. When a heavily armed protection train pulled into Mussidan station, a violent clash followed. The train commander was killed, and most of the German personnel guarding the train, including personnel of the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, were either killed or wounded. 8 resistance fighters also died in the exchange. The Maquis withdrew into the countryside soon after the attack. The railway had been disrupted, but German forces were already preparing their response. For months, German commanders in occupied France had anticipated precisely this kind of resistance attack. Earlier in 1944, German high command orders instructed troops to respond immediately with gunfire when attacked by resistance fighters. If civilians were struck while soldiers returned fire, this was to be considered regrettable but unavoidable. Any building from which shots were fired was to be set ablaze without hesitation. German commanders were warned that excessive leniency would endanger their men and would not be tolerated. By early June 1944, directives covering the regions of Dordogne, Lot, and Corrèze demanded the harshest measures to restore order. The population was to be deterred through terror, and communities suspected of sheltering the Maquis were to face collective punishment. These reprisals were not spontaneous acts of anger. They formed part of a calculated strategy designed to crush resistance support and to demonstrate that any attack on